Okay, so today we're learning about measuring angles. So instead of trying to draw a bunch of crazy stuff on the board, we have a handout we're working from. So if somebody's watching this at home in the future, maybe get the handout before you try to follow along with what we're doing, because everything's on a handout. So angles get measured with a tool called a protractor. There was a day that we talked about that a little bit ago. Something like this is a protractor in the real world. On this paper, it just seemed easier to copy a drawing of a protractor out of the book. So before we start doing stuff with our protractor, let's talk about angles that we know about. We memorized some types of angles maybe a month ago. What was a type of angle that we learned about?
Straight.
Straight angles. What was the number for a straight angle?
So 180.
It would be 180. If we look at the picture on our handout, if I wanted to draw a straight angle, I'd only have one way that I could draw a straight angle on this paper. I'd have to go from A to O to I. Or I take that back. I guess there's two ways I could draw a straight angle. Other than from A to O to I, how else could I draw a straight angle? No. A to O to I would be straight. Who else would be straight? Slightly different, but not really different. Yeah?
A to F.
No. A to O to I is straight. Who else is my other straight path?
I to O to A.
I to O to A. Same letters, just put them in a different order. Okay, but if I go from I to O to A, that's straight. If I go A to O to I, that's also straight. So straight was an angle we did. That's good. What was another angle we did?
Right angle.
Right angle. What was the number for every right angle?
90.
90. If I wanted to draw a right angle on this paper, I'd have to go from who to who to who. What's a path that I could do a right angle?
A-O-F.
A to O to F. What would be another path I could do to trace out a right angle?
I to O to F.
I to O to F. I could also do either of those backwards. I could go, instead of A-O-F, I could go F-O-A. If I go backward, it's still the same path, really. What's another angle type we have from our memory days? Obtuse. What was up with obtuse's number?
Over 90, but less than 180.
Over 90, but less than 180. So that would be an angle that we're going to open up wider than what a right angle is. So one example of an obtuse might be from like A to O to H. If I traveled from A to O to H, that's opened up really wide. That would be an obtuse angle. Or maybe I to O to who could be an obtuse. I to O to lots of choices you could choose from. C would keep us obtuse. I O D. I O
B.
B would work. I O E would work. Any of those would be obtuse angles. So we'll get back to that idea in a second. And then what's our last option? Acute. How did an acute go? Less than 90. More than 0, less than 90. So anything that's pretty narrowed out like this. So maybe if I go AOB. AOB is a pretty skinny little angle. AOC is acute. AOD is acute. There's some acute angles on this for sure. But this has to do with us understanding the types of angles we have. Again, straight was 180, right was 90, but we're going to deal more with acutes and obtuses. Question about the angle types that we're looking for at all? So here's what's up. Angles again are measured with a tool called a protractor. A protractor always has two sets of numbers on it called scales. So if you look at any location on here, you'll see something like 20 but also 160 for the same lines. You'll see 30, but also 150 for the same lines. You'd see 40s, but also 140s for the same lines. Everywhere you look, you're going to see two different numbers, a bigger number and a smaller number. With one exception, what's the only spot that doesn't have the double number?
90.
90 is just 90. It doesn't have a double identity because that's just the way the protractor works. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the smaller number that we're looking at anytime there's an acute angle, meaning under 90, meaning both sides of the angle are letters that are on the left, or maybe both sides of the angle are letters that are on the right. But if all the letter angle pieces, the letters are on the same side, use the littler number. If you look at the names, you might also notice, or if you listened as we did them, every name had a similarity with a certain letter that went in a certain spot. What was the one letter that always just kept doing the same thing, every single one I named? Anybody notice a certain letter that went in a certain spot in every single name as we did them? Or look at the names that we've written here. O's in the middle. Yeah, every time, O is in the middle. So O is like the center position. If you have an actual protractor, right here at this center position, there's like a hole in it and lines drawn across here that can help you get stuff in the right spot. That's called the vertex of an angle. So if I were doing this on a piece of paper and I had an angle like this, the way the protractor is supposed to work, you're supposed to put this hole that I just talked about on the vertex of the angle, that's the name of the corner. Then there's this black line on my protractor that I should line up with the white line, and then I would follow this through a number, and I held it up backwards, so that's not going to work. But we measure it up like this. Is this an acute or an obtuse? Acute. Because right angles go straight like this. If I want to be an obtuse, I have to open up wider. This I opened up narrower, so that's an acute. So since it's opened up narrower to be an acute, would I use the bigger number or would I use the littler number? Are acutes bigger numbers or are acute littler numbers? Little. So right here on my protractor, it's going through a line that's marked with 60, but that line's also marked with 120. So should I pick the 60 or the 120?
60.
Pick the 60 because I want the smaller one because it's acute. That's kind of in our imagination what we're doing, but I'm not trying to give you protractors and use them. We're trying to just work from a paper. It keeps your life a little simpler not to have to carry protractors around. They also tend to do that when you carry them in backpacks. Protractors don't last, they're plastic. Question about, what's up? Okay, so let's look at this first one. If I go from A to O to B, A is on the right, B is on the right. They're both on the right. So am I going to hunt out a littler number for being acute, or am I going to hunt out a bigger number for being obtuse? Acute. Go little number. So if we look at, don't worry about the A, worry about the B. The A is already going through like a zero line. That's not going to contribute anything to our cause. We need to figure out what number the B is going through. So if you're an old person like me, you have to get close, you take off your glasses and sometimes look at the little marks. Can anybody give me, if we're looking at the little numbers, what number does the B go through? You can't see the mark because the B went literally through the mark.
175?
No, we want to go little. If we were obtuse, you'd be right.
5.
5. We're going through a 5.
Oh,
You with that?
yeah.
Okay, so you can see in a lot of the other spaces on the protractor, you can see there's like a pretty long line, let's say, for maybe like 100. And then there's another pretty long line for a 110. When they do this line that's not quite as big, they don't write the number on the protractor, but what number would that be going with?
105.
105, it's right in the middle. But sometimes you can't see that it's right in the middle because the drawing of this line that they're going to call like W or something, it goes right on top of the mark you needed. Okay. What if I went like this little baby mark? What would this little baby mark be for?
101?
101. then that would be
102,
102,
103,
104. When we go past 105, we go 106, 7, 8, 9. This protractor, they made our life a little harder because they drew in halves. We're never going to use the halves. At no point in the homework, no point on a quiz, the halves are not going to come into play. But they drew some really little, like tiny specks to make halves out of it. Just don't focus on those. Question about the 5. Okay, so let's go AOC, not to be confused with our politicians in the news. There's a politician named AOC. I'll just keep my comments to myself. If we go from A to O to C, we both on the left, we both on the right. Ignore, don't worry about the O, just if we're looking at the A's and the C's. Both on the right. So that means we're acute or that means we're obtuse when they're on the same side? Acute. So we need to look at bigger number, littler number? Little. So what little number is the C cutting through?
15.
It is 15. AOD is a little bigger. Are we big enough to be obtuse yet? No. So keep looking at the little numbers. What little number does the D cut through?
25.
Not quite 25, because I can see the 25 line. Last time we couldn't see the 5 lines because we were on top of them. But the D is like kind of near that 25 line.
24.
No, right idea, but wrong direction. We're moving a little closer to the 30 side than the 20 side.
26.
26 is where we are, because we're right now counting up as we're rotating. AOE, are we big enough to be out of the acutes yet, or is AOE still acute?
Still acute.
Still acute. So use the littler number. E, what's E covering up?
45.
45. Anybody having trouble with 5s, 15s, 26s, 45s, anything confusing people? AOF, we're finally on new ground. What kind of angle did we already decide AOF was going to be? That's a right angle. So what number does the F sit on clearly? 90. AOG, finally, I don't know if any of you go to Assembly of God churches, but there you go, AOG. AOG finally is what type of angle, because we're big now.
Obtuse.
It's finally an obtuse, because A is on the right side of this picture. The G has worked past the F to be on the left side of the picture. So for the first time, we need to grab the bigger number because we're obtuse. AOG, big number, grab it. 100. AOH, big number, little number? Big. So we're somewhere in the like 130, 140 range. We're somewhere in between 130, 140. You just have to do your best to count to see which mark got covered up.
132.
It is 132. And then AOI we already talked about earlier. What's the AOI about?
Straight.
Straight. So number for AOI?
4.
180. Anybody that first column when we use the A's? Any kind of questions? Okay, why don't you take about 2-3 minutes and do the second column without me. Instead of using A every time, I'm using I every time, which means every obtuse is actually going to now turn into acute, and every acute turns into obtuse. But the straight stay straight, the rights stay right. But try to track. Since I is on the left, if the other letter's on the left, use the little number. But if I give you another letter on the right using I, grab the bigger number. Take a minute, try those out. We'll compare in a second.
Should we be putting a little degree symbol?
You know, you could. I was going to save that for last. Whether you put the degree symbol or not, I'm going to save on this. I don't care, because the protractor didn't use it. So if you don't use it, no real harm done. But if you know to put it, and you put it, that's good too. Either way. If they had put the degree signs, then I'd be all about the matching. But yeah, they didn't bother, so kind of freedom for us. If you missed that conversation, just eyes on the board for 1 second. Angles get measured with degrees, just like temperatures do. So we'd use that little circle up in like a superscript exponent type position, but you don't have to do that on you. Anybody want me to visit you while you work, in case you were just being shy when we were talking? It seemed like a lot of different people were talking or were with us based on face reactions, but it's sometimes hard to judge face reactions if people are all the way with you. Go another minute or two. Some people getting done, some people still chipping away a little bit. It's fine. Anybody still need a set? Just try to roll around, see how it goes. So, what do you think for that first one, IOA?
180.
It is 180. First one, 180. Anybody trouble there? IOB
175.
is 175. IOC
165?
is 165. IOD, sometimes people have trouble counting the right way and end up like off on the wrong side of a number.
154?
It is 154. Sometimes people will think that's like 150, you know, something else. Just, you're closer to 150 than you are to 160. So go 150 but low-ish to 154, not counting up to 156. IOE
135?
is 135. IOF
IOF
is
is 90.
90. IOG is 80. IOH is another one that's like in the middle, and sometimes people count like a little bit the wrong direction and get a little bit goofed up by a couple degrees.
49.
That's close.
32.
That's colder. Up for grabs.
148.
It's gonna, what did you say?
148.
48 or 148?
148.
Disagree?
48.
Plain old 48. So if we go IOH, I is on the left, H is on the left. They're both on the left, so we want to go low. We want to look at the 40, 50 kind of numbers. We're in between 40 and 50, but we're definitely closer to 50. I can see the 45 line, and we're closer to 50. So we have to work down from 50 like 2 degrees. I can see the 49 mark is showing, and then I can't see the 48 line showing, so that means we're on the 48 line because I can't see it. Does that make sense? You okay with the 48? Are you good with 48 now? Are you good on the 48 yet? Anybody, any of the ones that are the hardest are the ones that are like in the middle. If they land on a 10, that's the easiest. If they land on a 5, that's not so bad. When they land on one of the ones, you just have to be careful you're counting the right way. Because sometimes people will see, you know, if this is the 60 line and we're right here, what might that be?
59?
Might be 59, might also be 61, because we're off by 1. You have to figure out which way you are. If this next mark is a 70, then this we're sitting at 61. But if the neighboring mark had been a 50, then you're at 59. You have to pay attention, when you're in the middle, you have to pay attention to like both sides of the number.
So, for like, when you're on the left side, do you have to go by the top number or the bottom number?
It's not about top or bottom, it's about bigger or smaller. So if both letters are on the left, go little number. If both numbers are on the right, go little number. If you get one letter from the left and one letter from the right, that's where you go big number.
Wait, so is this the left side?
Anything, the F is what divides the picture in half. So I and H and G are on the left.
Yeah.
A, B, C, D, E are on the right. So if they do any problem that has an A, B, C, D, E with another A, B, C, D, E, go little. But if they do an A, B, C, D, E with a G, H, I, go big.
What if it's both left?
If they're both left, go little.
Oh, that's
So if they do a G, H, I with another G, H, I, go little.
Wait, so can you repeat IOG?
I, O, G, they're both on the left, so go little, that's the 80.
That's-
You get it?
yeah, I got it.
Anybody, protractors, any kind of question about what's up with that? So one other lesson we have to do that's slightly related, because it also involves angles, so I just threw this in. This doesn't get its own day, because it's not a very complicated thing. There's a fact about triangles and angles that you might already know. Does anybody know a fact about triangles and angles? If not, I'll tell you in 10 seconds. It has to do with adding. Three angles in a triangle always add up to the same number. Drawing a blank. Well, it's a good thing I'm here. It's 180. Anytime you add up three angles in a triangle, the total is always going to be 180 degrees. So they're going to give you some pictures in the homework where they'll give you two of the angles. They expect you to figure out the mystery angle. So if I tell you there's a 60 and I tell you there's a 40, add up what you have. So far there's 100. How would we figure out then who's missing if the total is going to be 180?
80.
It is 80. How do you do that, Matt? Subtract it from
180.
180. All of these problems will go 180 minus whatever you have so far. So for this, what do you have so far?
110.
110. So the missing thing here is
70.
70. Missing thing here was 80. This, what do you have so far?
150.
150.
150.
So missing piece,
30.
30. This one, I didn't give you one of the numbers, but I kind of did. What do I mean? I kind of gave you a number. 90. The right angle perpendicular symbol means 90. So far, what did you get?
110.
110. So who's the missing piece?
70.
7. So there's a little tiny bit of the homework that's going to do that. The angles have to add up to 180. That's just a fact. So add up what you give, what you're given, and then 180 minus that tells you who you're short. That. So we're headed to two pieces. There's a small piece of homework that is the 345 letters. The 345 letters just has to do with these triangle ideas that we just did in the last 2 minutes. So 345 letters, I think there's like an A, B, C, D, they'll draw you some triangles, you figure out who's missing. The main thing to the back is set YY. Set YY is going to be a Rego protractor group. They'll do it the same way I did. I stole their protractor from a different page of the book. But they're going to draw you a slightly more crowded protractor. And instead of us, we just did maybe like 16 questions. There will be 25 in the set YY because their protractors just has a little more activity on it. So, 345 letters, YY. Question about that. In terms of quizzes, I'm going to add this to the list for the subs. Thursday, we're going to do the formulas quiz. Everybody. Friday, we'll do the formulas quiz, everybody. So just study for that one for now. I didn't forget about the other quizzes, but I don't want to burden the subs with having to decide, like some people are doing them and some people aren't, and 2 perfects in a row and all that. Like that's just confusing. So we're not going to do the positive negatives or the divide bys while I'm gone, but we'll do this the 2 days that I'm gone. What I do want to do today before we run out of time is, if you're short a quiz or 2, I'm going to have you do those now before you go. Because some people the one day chose to take them, and some people chose not to, and that kind of put us out of balance. So if you need to do those, we'll do those now before you go, but you can have a study minute before we do that. But why don't we shut the record down, and I'll fish some quizzes out.